Hello, this is Chapter 8, our Introduction to Islamic Art. So I always have to give a little caution. I am just simply, my intent here is to introduce students of various backgrounds to the beauty and complexity of Islamic art my hope is that I do not misrepresent that religion. So it's not my intent ever to offend the Muslim students. Let's move to a map. So when we looked at Byzantine art, we examined the art of a political entity that had endured more or less successfully for almost 1,000 years. Having a capital and an emperor helped to ensure this stylistic cohesion. Islamic culture from the 9th century onward advanced without political cohesion. The cohesion of Islamic culture was maintained by its shared faith. Even so, the art of Islam has a history of remarkable diversity and regional identities. One of the objectives of this introduction to the richness of Islamic culture is to gain an appreciation for both the diversity and for the power of inventiveness that accompanied Islamic art where it appeared. A power, by the way, that can be seen in Islam's science, math, and geography as well. So Islam started in the year 610 when the Prophet Muhammad received a revelation and started sharing it with others. This united warring clans. Muhammad, his birthplace was in Mecca down here, and so he received his revelation and shared it with people in his neighborhood, in his vicinity. The key to, and then he wrote his revelations down, and it becomes their text called the Quran. And the key to the Quran and to Islam is its monotheism, which means its belief in a single God, and a code for living a life that glorifies Allah. The earliest Islamic art reflects Byzantine art of the surroundings, but developed a richer vocabulary of non-figural ornament. So all around here, this was all part of the Byzantine Empire. And every place where the earliest Islamic art arises, there was also Byzantine art and Byzantine Christians living there. It is a text-based religion. The Quran cannot be overemphasized. It is the holy book and central to the faith and the art. It is also strongly iconoclastic, meaning that they avoid making images, especially in the context of worship or of their mosques. The 5 pillars of Islam include the 5 obligations, and they are to profess faith in the one God, to worship 5 times a day facing Mecca, to give alms to the poor, to fast during Ramadan, to make a Hajj to Mecca at some point in your life. Muslims believe that when they pray, they have direct contact with Allah, and their worship is very simple, without elaborate ceremony. This could not be more different from Byzantine culture. The mosques were probably modeled after Muhammad's home, and we'll see that very soon. So here's just another slide that tells a little bit more about Muhammad, the fact that when he was born, and that he was forced to flee to Medina in 622. So his message was not always well received, but eventually it was. And his fleeing became known as the Hijra. The character of Islam is, of course, a belief in a single all-powerful God and those 5 pillars. So we're going to start by looking at a very early monument in Islamic art, and this is the Dome of the Rock. So Islam, for a large part, spread by military conquest, for the most part, from the year 661 to 750. By the early 8th century, it had spread to India and Spain, and within 100 miles of Paris. Well, let's go back and check that map. So it had spread over here to India, and within 100 miles of Paris. We don't really get that close on this map. This dynasty built ostentatious structures for Allah and themselves, including many mosques and this Dome of the Rock, which is not a mosque. So this is the holy place in Muslim history. It involves the night journey of Muhammad, where Gabriel, the angel, took Muhammad on a horse to Jerusalem, where he met all the prophets of Allah. And from here, he ascended a ladder from this rock to heaven. The building was built by Syrian Byzantine artists, and it is octagonal in shape. It is a central plan building, not unlike the central plans that we've already seen, which include Santa Costanza in Rome and San Vitale in Ravenna. A central plan with the rock at the center. The exterior, which you see here, is decorated with ceramic tiles that are glazed and patterned in elaborate patterns, and especially the upper register. The lower seems to be just plain stone. But the ceramic tiles, I've got a detail here to show you a little more so you can see the patterns that were created here. And then this register up above has Arabic writing with passages from the Quran on the building. This is what the interior looks like. So like I said, it is a central plan. It's very similar to Santa Costanza with the ambulatory around the outside. The central plan here, a raised center portion with clerestory windows. All of this, of course, designed by a Byzantine artist who had familiarity with central plan structures. So in the center of the Dome of the Rock is the actual rock. And I have a photograph of the interior that does not show that. So here's the photo. You cannot see the rock, but you have to take it on faith that it's there. I mean, if you were in the building, you could see the rock. This photograph does not show that. So look at the decorations. This should remind you a lot of the Byzantine structures we saw, where it's just every surface seems to be covered with something very decorative and very beautiful. The difference here is that there are no figures, there are no animals, there's just a bunch of scrolls, also called arabesques, and just beautiful patterns. And of course, the people visiting the Dome of the Rock could walk completely around the rock on this ambulatory. Ambulatory just means a walkway. So this is Dome of the Rock. It was built, by the way, on the site of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. So it stands there to this day and is a hotly contested piece of real estate. But the Dome of the Rock is there. So Muslims worship regularly in mosques. All are oriented in the direction of Mecca, the birthplace of Muhammad. And worshippers face that when praying. The mihrab niches identify the Qibla wall, and that is the direction of Mecca. So anybody walking into a mosque would be able to identify what direction they should face. The maksura is an enclosure in front of the mihrab. The minbar pulpit is a raised platform for the prayer leader. So we're going to look at a very old mosque, a very old form of mosque, the Great Mosque at Kairouan, Tunisia, and it displays an early form. The rectangular plan is divided between courtyard and hypo-style prayer hall. The minaret at one end of the courtyard became a standard feature of mosques. So here's an aerial view of that mosque in Kairouan, Tunisia. This is the courtyard, obviously. This is the minaret that becomes a standard feature in most mosques, where 5 times a day a man would go up into the tower and call from the top of the tower, call the faithful to prayer. This is the hypostyle hall. So you just have to take my word for it. I do not have an interior, but it would be full of columns that would support that flat roof. This is the Qibla wall that faces Mecca, so everybody would pray there. Now, this early style of mosque is thought to be modeled after Muhammad's house, where he started the preaching, started the spreading of the word of his revelation. And this photo is very handy because it includes some similar houses in the neighborhood. So you can see how they are square rectangular houses with a rectangular courtyard, so they enclose the courtyard. I think it's very similar to what we saw in Pompeii, where the house is built right up to the street and the yard is open in the center. So that's whatever yard you have. I have another photograph here of this mosque, which I think is slightly more beautiful because it's shot at probably late in the day, so we get raking light. But you can also see by this one that it's not perfectly symmetrical, that there is a little bit of wonkiness. And if you consider the age of these old buildings and how many times they've probably been remodeled or enlarged, then you can understand that things are not going to be perfect. So there's a plan showing it. Also showing the presence of the Qibla wall, the niche here, the mihrab, and the courtyard, the minaret, everything is there. So this is the sort of information that you won't really need any information about the history or the movement or the political intrigues of the leaders of this empire. No, don't worry about it. But one leader, Abd al-Rahman I, fled across North Africa into southern Spain and formed a capital at Cordoba, Spain. The great mosque of Cordoba was built at the site of an earlier Christian church, and distinctive horseshoe arches came to be associated with Islamic architecture. So let's have a look at that. The community, the Islamic community, will grow very large in Cordoba, and there will also be communities throughout most of southern Spain. And the name of this territory in their language was called Al-Andalus. It's where we get Andalusia. So anyway, this is an interior of the prayer hall of the Great Mosque of Cordoba. And it is a hypostyle hall, so we're able to see the presence of all those columns that are supporting the roof. And the horseshoe arches. So let's have a look at the arches. And they're very colorful. They're in two colors, as you can see. So a Roman arch was just 180 degrees, or half a circle. But a horseshoe arch comes around more than half a circle. So it's more than 180 degrees. It gives a little hook towards the bottom. It had been done by Spanish church builders, but it really is taken over by the Islamic builders after that and becomes identified with them. So this hypostyle hall, it's kind of, you do feel disoriented. You can't tell where the walls are. From here, you could not even get a sense which direction you should be praying, but no worries, you could sort it all out. Did you notice that these are doubled up? So each pair of columns has this little build up here, and then a lower arch and an upper arch here. And all of this supports the roof, and I'll show you that presently. Notice also that the lower parts of all these columns, which, by the way, are Roman columns, recycled here, are shiny and darker in color, and that's because they are within reach of these nasty, dirty human beings who touch them and make them shiny and dirty. And there's a good illustration there of a tourist. So here's an aerial view now of that very mosque in Cordoba. So I have a few things to tell you, and that is that it is no longer a mosque, and in fact it reflects its conversion back into a church. So it was originally a church back in the early Middle Ages, early Christian, and then it was taken over, converted into a mosque, enlarged many times as a mosque, and then in 1492 when Ferdinand and Isabella made all of the Muslims in Spain leave, it was reconverted into a church and reclaimed. And at that time, this structure was built, and I think they decided to turn the courtyard into a garden. So it does reflect those changes. But now we're going to try to ignore those and see all of these pitched roofs here. This is what was over the hypostyle hall. This is the Qibla wall here. This is the, I'm going to show you the interior of that dome, which is really amazing. Maybe you can get a sense of scale of it. I don't know. I think there are some people in the street, so this might give you a scale. This is pretty big, in other words. And the minaret over here on the courtyard, a nice arcade too, going around the courtyard. So let's look at that enlargement plan here. So here's the minaret. And originally it was in the center of the courtyard, which I think went from here to here. And then the prayer hall up here with all those little dots representing the columns, of course. But when it was enlarged greatly, the fifth enlargement over here, then the minaret sort of went off center. But there it is. And there's the mihrab and the mihrab wall. The presence of the church, I'm thinking, is like somewhere right in here. Maybe. No, it's further in. Oh, right about there. Not including it in that plan. So here's the interior of that dome that we saw on the exterior view of the church. And it's absolutely beautiful. Absolutely. So you can admire here the complexity of the shape, the geometry that was used to plan and construct this, and the beauty, like this lobed dome. I don't believe we've seen anything like this before, where it's constructed of these various curved sections that are all covered with tiles and mosaics of gold and blue, and no figures, no figures. Some vines over here is about as close as you get to anything representing anything in the real world. And these ribs that cross each other, just absolutely gorgeous and stunning. So this is the ribbed dome in front of the mihrab. I tried to get some pictures that would reveal the scale of it, because it's kind of difficult to get a sense of scale when you're looking up at something. But these are the ribs, and here's another arch on the wall. This is a vertical wall here, and a little more context here. So it's really big, really, really big and really gorgeous. So calligraphy. Calligraphy is very important in this culture. A reverence for the Quran as the Word of God extends by association to the act of writing itself. The earliest formal script is called Kufic, and that's in red because it will show up on the quiz. And Kufic was used in the 9th century Syrian Quran, and that's like the font. So it's not the language, it is not the text, it really is just the style of lettering that we're talking about. So let's look at this one. So here's another one. This Quran is written on vellum, as paper had not yet replaced parchment. Vellum is the animal skin. I showed you one manuscript in Byzantine culture, and it was made on vellum, animal skin that's been scraped and cleaned and stretched and dried, and then it is very fine and thin, but it's also very strong. And the writing, but just notice the beauty of the strokes. So this was all part of it, was to make this a work of art. And then down here, this gold embossed section also has writing in it, and a little, I don't know, a little ornament off to the side. So absolutely gorgeous. And I have some more Quran to show you, some more bonus features here. This one I was especially happy to find, and it is a page from a 7th century Quran. So this dates back to the same century as Muhammad's revelation. So this is the oldest one that I found. And you can see it's not it just looks like somebody was writing to get the words down. They did not care a whole lot about the beauty or ornamentation of this. It was just simply for efficiency to record it. And so we get some odd writing, some angles and stuff. Here's another beautiful one. This shows what that parchment looks like. It's very thin, but it's not as thin as paper, and it doesn't lie as flat as paper either. But this is a codex. This is a book where leaves or pages are bound along one edge. It's just simply what we call a book, but it was newfangled. And we have some beautiful Kufic script in there as well. Beautiful. And another one, I think this one was perhaps written in black and then gold strokes were placed over each letter, because it looks to me like it's black and gold. Each stroke of the pen is both black and gold, and it has a lot of ornaments on the side as well, and one of those long bars of embossing with gold. So Kufic was also used to decorate this plate, a type of white pottery from Nishapur and Samarkand over way in the east. In the 10th century was decorated with Kufic. The writing on this plate says, "Knowledge, the beginning of it is bitter to taste, but the end is sweeter than honey." And I'm sure as students you're all finding that eventually the knowledge you gain will be sweet, sweet to have. And here's something I found also, which I thought was interesting, because it looks very much like the Qurans we just saw, with the gold embossing and the Arabic script, the writing. But this is actually a gospel book. So if you could read it, you would be reading one of the Gospels, the story of Jesus' life. So there's a lot of crossover there, a lot of contact. And it's not a bad thing. Later Islamic art in Persia, Spain, and Turkey. So power in the Islamic world of the 11th century fell into the hands of independent regional rulers. The Seljuks established a dynasty in Persia in 1040 that would last until 1157. In the west, Umayyad Spain engaged in constant warfare with Christian armies that would end only in 1492. And there's that date again. So it should be in your mind. So here's our map and showing you where we're going next. We're going to look way over here in the very far east. And I'm going to show you some structures here in Persia, present-day Iran, and also in Kyrgyzstan up here, I believe. Samarkand. I'm showing you some stuff from Samarkand. So we're going to see a different style of mosque now. So there's a lot of variety, more than you would think. So the Seljuks adopted the Iwan, or open vaulted room. They perfected a mosque madrasa plan consisting of 4 Iwans around an internal courtyard. The Abbasi mosque has a south Qibla Iwan vaulted with muqarnas, or niche-like cells. The only word there that you need to know is Iwan, which is in red. So here's an Iwan. And I wrote there, this is not a Qibla, but rather is an Iwan. So it happens to be the Qibla Iwan, which means it's on the side of the courtyard facing Mecca. But there are Iwans all around the courtyard. This is just one. So this is what an Iwan looks like, which is kind of a man-made cave with a dome on it in this case, and a couple of minarets here. But all of these surfaces have been covered with glazed ceramic tiles and beautiful patterns of blue. That's one reason why these 4 Iwan mosques are just so beautiful, that they're usually covered with tiles and decorated very beautifully. Also notice the date, that they're considerably later than the mosque in Cordoba or in Tunisia. So here's the Great Mosque of Isfahan, Iran, showing, I believe this is probably the Qibla Iwan, and here's one that is not. But there would have been one of these on each of the four sides. Look at the scale of these things. These are humans down here. And I believe this is the same mosque. I did try to sort all these out because I find a lot of pictures on the internet are not correctly labeled. But I try to do my best. So this shows the 4 Iwans of a 4 Iwan mosque. The photographer seems to be up in the air above the Qibla wall. So underneath here, down here, is the direction of Mecca. And there's a practical purpose to the Iwans because people would gather, and you can kind of see, well, the picture I just showed you, there were people hanging out in the Iwan or near the Iwan. And so the Iwans create these little contained environments. And in the winter, when it would be really cold, for example, and maybe windy, you could gather with your friends to visit in a sun-filled Iwan, because the sun would always be in one Iwan. But maybe in the summer when it's broiling hot and you want to visit with your friends, you could congregate in a very shady Iwan to visit. So you have a choice of climate control. And here's the plan of this, just so you can see. There's a much more extensive, oh, sorry, this is the Qibla here. It seemed that to me, but didn't want to confuse you. So here's this Iwan, and we're up here. We're not over the Qibla. I thought that looked very big. But the prayer hall completely surrounds it, as you can see. So instead of just being in a single block at one end of the courtyard, it is completely surrounding the courtyard. And this is comparing it to the plan of the Great Mosque at Cordoba, the original plan. Also similar to the one in Tunisia, with courtyard at one end and the Qibla wall opposite. And this one is much more elaborate, a lot more going on there with the 4 Iwans and the prayer hall completely surrounding it. So, and here shows a courtyard of a 4 Iwan mosque that is completely filled with worshipers all lined up, all ready to pray. Must have been a beautiful day because they're not inside in the prayer hall. Or that could just be the overflow. I don't know. The Seljuks in Persia, the 14th century mosaic mihrab from a madrasa in Isfahan presented glorious tile work. Each piece of tile, including the pieces of calligraphy, was cut individually and assembled in mortar. The white against turquoise and cobalt blue with accents of green and dark yellow are characteristic of Persian tile work. I just think it's beautiful, and I'm just including this because it's good to have a close-up view so you can see the various patterning that was used and the complexity of the patterning and the beauty of the tile work. So that's that mihrab. And now I promised you I'd show you some from much further east. This is way out in the east in Samarkand. 3 Iwans from Samarkand. I have a friend who was from there, and she showed these pictures, and I got her to give me copies. So beautiful, beautiful. But it just shows the variety of structures. But there's also similarities, these little caves with the pointed arches there. I think this dome is particularly beautiful, and I love how this minaret was covered with pattern as well. So that's Samarkand. This is the end of part 1, and this was by far the most important part of Islamic art, and the next part will be a little bit shorter. So please stay tuned. It will go very quickly, and there are some pictures of images and stories in there. So see you soon.